Hello everybody, excuse the rag that's substituting for an outfit today, but it really is boiling. So, I've made a lot of videos on this channel exposing terrible people, scammers, thieves, pests of any kind really that make this industry a worse place to be active in. This video is not as severe as those, but sometimes people deserve to be called out, and when nobody else will, I will. So today's video is about Woodbine and Woodrite guitars and Steve Rice, otherwise known as Does It Doom. So before we get to the juice, let's get some lore out of the way. If you're big into doom metal, you probably know this already, but I'll still recap it for those who aren't. Woodbine Guitars is a guitar custom shop from Vancouver, Canada, ran by one Shay Seymour. And a few years ago, around 2021, they partnered up with Steve Rice from the YouTube channel Does It Doom to create Woodrite Guitars, a similarly doom metal oriented guitar brand with similar shapes, but producing imports made in Indonesia, specifically at PT Wildwood, which is the same factory that makes low-end Schecter, low-end Solar guitars, PRS SE, and tons more. And Woodrite's most popular model is the Warlord, a double-cut shape that's offered as either a 6-string or a 9-string, where the treble strings will each be doubled. And if you're beginning to feel like you've seen that shape before, yes you have. Allow me to introduce you to the First Act Custom Shop. Now, most of you may know First Act only as being some sort of cheap, shitty Walmart guitar brand. And being as young as I am, I didn't know much more than that myself. So I reached out to the one man who could explain it better than any other. Kelly Butler, the man formerly in charge of the First Act Custom Shop. Kelly was working at the Gibson Custom Shop in the 2000s when First Act reached out to him, saying that they wanted an exclusive line of made in USA hand-built guitars. At the time, all they were selling were these horrible cheap Fender and Gibson copies, and so this was going to give the brand some more credibility. Kelly took the offer, was essentially handed a company credit card and complete creative freedom, and a couple of years later had hired a few more Gibson Custom Shop colleagues and established the First Act Custom Shop. During his time at Gibson, Kelly had designed a shape that was supposed to be a one-off, but later ended up becoming the Johnny A signature model. And that ended up becoming one of 3 main shapes for the First Act Custom Shop: the Lola, Delia, and Sheena. He had gotten these things into the hands of John Mayer, Slash, Depeche Mode, and dozens more major artists. And one of the other Gibson Custom Shop guys that Kelly had hired, John McGuire, just so happened to be friendly with Matt Pike from High on Fire and Sleep. And they ended up making him a custom 9-string version of the Lola double cut that ended up with a cult following almost as big as that of the First Act Custom Shop itself. A while later, around 2008, Kelly felt that his work at First Act was done, he left the First Act Custom Shop behind, moved back home to Tennessee, and shortly thereafter it shut down. And then, a few years later, a man by the name of Steve Rice from the YouTube channel Does It Doom reached out to Kelly. Steve had been buying up all of the First Act Custom Shop double cuts that would pop up online, developed sort of a collection of them, and started asking Kelly a bunch of questions about the build and development process and all of that. And it quickly became very clear that these were less friendly conversations that they were having, and more so R&D for Steve's own brand. Because not long before this, Kelly was tagged in the comment section of one of the first ever Facebook posts showing a Woodrite Warlord guitar. And when he couldn't help himself but make a snarky comment underneath it about how unoriginal the design is, they said, well, it's just a ripoff of the Johnny A signature anyway, as if he hadn't designed that. There's also this magnificent piece of lost media that I happened to archive when somebody first posted it. A deleted conversation in the comment section of a Woodrite Instagram post. Initially, all that Woodrite had taken from the First Act Custom Shop was the design of the Matt Pike Lola double cut, which was never produced at scale. They made a few of them by hand in the custom shop. And that's their Warlord model, which I showed you a minute ago. But then, Woodrite came out with the Seer, which is a 1-to-1 copy of the First Act Custom Shop Lola single cut, which was produced at scale. And Steve's response to this, at least the quintessence of it, you can read the whole thing yourself if you like, was, well, First Act doesn't exist anymore, so they can sue me if they want to. I'll happily steal this thing that you've designed. Good luck with your shitty little company. They pretend that this is about reviving legendary shapes or something like that, but the people who designed those shapes are still alive and building guitars. This is just kinda lame. Of course, this doesn't compare to some of the stuff that I've exposed people for doing in my videos, but if it wasn't kinda scummy, then why did Steve delete all of those comments again? And Steve's company ripped both of these shapes off to a T. They even went as far as copying the famous split anvil inlay design from the Matt Pike signature. And here's the kicker, and this is one of the funniest things that I have ever read. I know of a guitar company who, years before they even knew who Kelly Butler was, reached out to Woodrite, or to Steve from Does It Doom, to ask if they could use the inlay design that he stole, and he said no. They didn't even have to ask. It was just a professional courtesy, that's about it. He doesn't have any right to tell them not to use it, but he did. There are many examples in this industry of one manufacturer copying another, and when it happens to a big corporate guitar company, I'm always inclined to give it a pass. I've got a BC Rich Stealth copy back there from Iron Label Guitars. I've had 2 Hufschmidt guitars that were very, very much based on Ibanez designs. Who cares? I feel like once your design has been all over Chinese manufacturing for 2.5 decades, there's really not all that much you can do to enforce it. Fender. But Kelly Butler is the little guy. He worked for Gibson Custom Shop for a number of years, then for the First Act Custom Shop, and now under his own name, K. Butler Guitars. Hey, what's all this? Time for an ad break already? You know it, baby. Give me 30 seconds to tell you about today's sponsor, Very Nice Guitars. What I'm holding in my hands here is a one-of-one Ibanez J Custom, and if you want to be able to get your hands on the rarest and sickest high-end boutique gear on a regular basis, then you have to check out Very Nice Guitars. They are my favorite recurring sponsor on the channel, and I am constantly in awe of the stuff that they have in their catalog. They've had stuff owned by Steve Vai, they've had true one-of-one custom instruments like this one, and everything else, ranging from Mayones to high-end Solar to Ibanez J Custom, LA Custom, Music Man, Abasi, and anything you want. Thank you to VNG for sponsoring, and back to the video. I've also heard stories about PT Wildwood, the factory that builds Woodrite, allegedly selling these things out the back door for like $3.99 before putting the headstock decals on. Now, I have no confirmation of this, but I've heard it from a few different sources, and I guess that's what you're paying $1,800 for. And then there's the Seeger Guitars arc. You may be familiar with Seeger Guitars, or you may not. It's a small guitar company run out of Maine by one man named Dallas Seeger. And if you follow Seeger Guitars on Instagram, then there's a good chance you've seen his humorous rants about Woodrite Guitars and Mad Pike. I spent about an hour on the phone with Dallas in preparation for this video, and I found out some interesting stuff. Around 2016, Dallas built a custom Seeger guitar for Matt Pike from Sleep. And he loved that thing so much that about 2 years ago now, he had another one built with specs such that it would have cost upwards of $10,000. That may sound ridiculous, and I suppose to some people it might be, but remember, these are top-of-the-line instruments. Seeger gave Matt a massive discount on that instrument, and shortly after receiving it, Matt called him up and said, "Hey, I have this deal with Woodrite Guitars for a signature guitar now, so I'm not going to be playing this beautiful top-of-the-line instrument that you gave me a hefty discount on." Now imagine how you'd feel hearing that after just giving somebody that kind of discount on that kind of guitar. And in that exact mood, Seeger took to Instagram for the first time to talk about it, and also to make sure that nobody, under any circumstance, makes a connection in their head between an Indonesian import guitar brand and something like Seeger, which is about as good as it gets. And then, something else happened. Brent Hines from Mastodon died. Now, Brent was known for playing a few different guitars, but amongst those was his signature Woodrite Flying V, dubbed the Dirty B. And within 48 hours of his passing, Woodrite made a post on Instagram advertising his signature guitar. Now, I don't have to mention that this is in incredibly poor taste. This wasn't like a "we're donating all the money to his family" type thing. This was very much a for-profit advertisement, using the clout of somebody very beloved who had just died. This post was deleted within minutes, and I cannot find a screenshot of it anywhere, no matter who I've asked. But since nobody has screenshot evidence of it, every time that you bring it up, the people behind Woodrite and Woodbine act like you're running some slander smear campaign on them and that this never happened. And when Seeger mentioned this publicly, they let Matt Pike loose on him like Mr. Burns with his rabid dogs, which sort of inadvertently led to the inside joke on Seeger's page about him firing Pike.
You know, if I had to console myself, on paper, I fired Matt Pike first. When the historians uncover this post, they're gonna see I fired him first.
And his fans ended up calling the companies Wood Bitch and Wood Wrong. But then, after I posted about it, a viewer of mine took to a Mastodon fans Facebook group to ask about it, and a bunch of people remembered, including myself and including Seeger. But within minutes of me finding that Facebook post, so did Shay Seymour, the man in charge of the Woodbine Custom Shop. And he once again, for some reason, threatened to let Matt Pike loose on everybody and give them a tongue lashing. Now, I don't know if Pike is this guy's bodyguard or something, But that threat gets really old really quick, and I'd also really prefer if Matt Pike kept his tongue in his mouth. He doesn't look like he smelled very good. I'm not gonna reveal the identity of the viewer who sent me all this shit, but he appears to be of Turkish descent, and we'll get into why that matters in just a second. This guy spent a little while taunting Mr. Seymour and having him contradict himself, and then even sent him his phone number saying to have Matt Pike call him. And when he messaged the official Woodbine brand Instagram account, Shay Seymour immediately resorted to calling him a goat fucker. I'm not joking, that no second thought about doing that on the main business account, and boy is this one of the most glorious screenshots that I have. I probably wouldn't even have made this video if it wasn't for this. I mean, mwah. And the fun thing about this is, as mild as this drama was compared to some other stuff that I've talked about, it all could have been avoided with some simple communication. There's a small guitar builder in Nashville, Tennessee called Scale Model Guitars, who a few years ago reached out to Kelly Butler asking to use his First Act custom shop Lola shape in exchange for some royalties. And he said yes, because of course he did. That's a licensing fee. You take something that I made, you cut me into the profits, we're all good. Whenever you ask Steve or Woodrite about it, they say that it's just a tribute to the original, but a tribute, just that word, implies a level of goodwill that I know for a fact is not there. These aren't horrible, hardened criminals, they're not even scammers, they're just kinda scumbags, and also apparently racist. That was an unnecessary tidbit that they added completely by themselves. I had to do zero investigating for that. So Mr. Seymour, please feel free to also ban me from any upcoming Mastodon shows. I really had no desire to go there anyway. And if you yourself were a big fan of Brent Hines, or if you're just a big fan of companies who are cool, perhaps reconsider your purchase from Woodrite Guitars. Thank you so much for watching, and Matt Pike, if you want my phone number for a tongue lashing, then please feel free to reach out and I'll give it to you. Mwah. Good night.